This is the Writers Podcast, a Writers After Dark radio production, bringing you the best in writing advice, news, trends, and interviews. Hosted by award-winning authors S.K. Anthony and Raymond Esposito.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Writers Podcast. I'm Raymond Esposito, and I'm here with
S.K. Anthony.
You know, SK, to me, there are two types of people in this world, writers and editors. Now, as a wordsmith, I don't think anything frustrates me like the grammar rules do. It feels like someone snuck math into the writing craft.
Yes, it does. So tonight we're putting our editor, Lynda Dietz, on the spot and asking some of those burning questions writers have. So Lynda, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Well, we had to because you pretty much had a gun to our heads, but sure.
Well, kind of, and all that begging was just getting tiresome. I figured I'd wear you down.
It worked.
Did you know that SK could have had Nicki Minaj, but she didn't?
You know, I heard a rumor to that effect. I still can't believe, if we had been her friends back then,
I worked with her.
She said yes.
Yes, I worked with her for a year. I drove her back and forth to work. And yes, she will know my name, my real name. She will know me. And yes, She also did come on to me. But this was back then when she wasn't rich and famous.
And she still wanted you.
All right, we digress. Tonight we're talking about editing with our personal favorite editor, Lynda Dietz. Hey, and my first question is this. To me, I see the writing grammar thing this way. The writer is a singer who can't read sheet music. So my question is, why is it that grammar is so challenging for a lot of writers?
I think, and this is just my theory, but I think a lot of writers, they're creative. It's kind of like musicians. There are a lot of musicians who can't read sheet music either. So if that makes you feel any better, you're not alone.
It does.
It does.
Yes.
Good. I think that creative process, you think in more abstracts and other people think more concrete. So for us, every comma, every apostrophe, every hyphen matters, where the writer is more like, let's just get this down. This is such a great concept. I really need to tell it to the world.
Okay. I mean, I would agree with that aspect of it, but I will also say it's probably as challenging, like remembering the rules is probably as challenging for me as, calculus is.
Yes.
It just doesn't stick, and maybe you're right. I mean, maybe it is the creative side of me is just, I don't have a real interest in memorizing all the rules.
I agree with you. Like so many things I can go and learn, and I have gone through grammar and everything, but it's just my interest, my passion is just not with that. It's just boring. I want to create and not worry about that.
No, I get that totally. I think that, and that is it. It's where your passion is. My passion is, because I am so terrible at it in most aspects of life, my passion is to have all my ducks in a row. And it almost never happens except when I'm editing. So I think it's like where I can get my inner control freak out without actually doing any house cleaning.
so it gives you fulfillment.
It does. Oh, an odd fulfillment that most people don't really enjoy, but it works for me.
So the dust, that has to stay, but the comma splice has to go.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, dust is just going to come back. When I remove a comma, it stays gone.
We all have our kinks. But listen, forget about indies for a second. Mm-hmm. Do you think in even bestseller novels you could find at least one grammatical error in each?
At least. My husband reads the G.R.R. Martin, Song of Fire and Ice series. Yes. And he will tell me almost every book, he'll say, oh, look at this. And he'll point out something that's grammatically incorrect or a typo or something like that. And I've noticed, there's no book that's perfect. And I think people think with a traditionally published book, you may expect perfection, but it's just not there.
I guess for me, and I recently I wrote an article and I ran that article through Grammarly and through Words Feature, and all was hey 100% looks good, and you still found several errors. Now my calculator never makes a mistake. Why is it these programs can't be perfect?
I think the programs, because they're not intuitive. I mean, it's intelligent to a point, but it only knows what it's programmed to look for. Word is notorious for horrible grammar suggestions, so I would tell anyone never to listen to Word's grammar suggestions. But Grammarly, it does a good job, but even a lot of the editors that I'm in contact with through different online groups, just they don't have a whole lot of good to say about Grammarly when it comes to putting Grammarly up against a live human being.
No, so that part I definitely get, but doesn't that speak to the fact that these rules are so so sensitive,
Complicated.
so complicated and convoluted that literally a machine can't apply rules to the rules of
Oh
grammar?
yeah. Um, they always say you need to know the rules in order to break them, and a program doesn't understand why you're breaking them, and it wants you to fix them, not understanding creativity.
That's what I go through every time I still use Grammarly constantly, but so many of the rules that it tells me that's not true. I'm like, no, that is exactly what I mean. Shush it. But
It doesn't want to be convinced.
I read an article in Copy Blogger. They had an article on that and those they didn't say Grammarly, they just said editing programs, and what they were arguing against is the suggestion of using whom, because their feeling is, listen, who is just the way we say it. It sounds better. It's how we want to write it, and whom is a terrible suggestion in certain types of writing.
I have to say, I agree. There are many editors who are really pushing for whom to just be abolished, because almost everybody misuses it. They'll put something like whom in more formal writing, but it just makes it sound stilted. Even when it's correct, it sounds very stilted.
If we do that, do we get to change Hemingway's book for Who the Bell
There you
Tolls?
go.
Doesn't really have the
I don't
same
know. He
ring
might
to
come
it,
back
does
from the
it?
dead to strangle you.
Okay, so Linda, you've edited tons of books. Based on that experience, what do you think is the most misunderstood rule in grammar or most broken?
Not necessarily grammar, maybe, but
Semicolons.
yeah, semicolons. I'm dying to say that I know you guys hate semicolons, and I love them, and I love the M dash too. But yeah, people use a lot of semicolons the wrong way, and I think it's just because they don't understand them. I've edited for people who have had them consistently wrong every single time they've used them, and completely opposite. And the tendency to use words like that, I removed probably more instances of the word that than any other word in any manuscript. And it's a common thing. I find it in my own blog writing and have to remove it too.
How could a writer learn and remember these rules, or what to avoid?
I think a lot of that just comes from reading. I like the way you do it. When I edit for you, you don't let me actually accept any of the changes, because you want to look at them and know why each one was made so you can remember for next time. And I think that's what so many writers really ought to do. Not that I want to not approve changes for people, but I think a lot of people just don't bother to learn, and they keep making the same mistakes over and over. And yes, if they have a good editor, their editor will catch those things, but the writer will continue to write with the same mistakes every time. So I think looking at your own edits before they're approved and knowing what was changed will help you to remember.
I think reading is fundamental in so many things. So yes, I agree.
And reading more things. Just reading blog posts about what you're writing, reading books about your craft, reading grammar books. There's a lot of funny grammar books out there. I know it sounds boring to most people, but there's a lot of grammar books and sentence writing books that are actually interesting and not a chore to read.
I don't know about that. For you, they're interesting.
I know.
I'm like, well,
Yeah, I know.
geek. Oh yeah. Oh, it was. Oh my god, it was
Will
so
you still
exciting.
be my friend?
It was so exciting reading about that.
It
grammar.
was those commas. Oh my goodness, I could hardly contain myself.
Though it brings me to an important question in my mind, and people often argue that readers don't know half the rules, so why even bother? And you brought up, my least favorite, which is the semicolon. And honestly, I understand the purpose of it, but when I'm reading anything and I see a semicolon, I don't even know what I'm supposed to like. I read that thing as a period or whatever. Like it seems like it doesn't add any information to a fiction reader's world. And a lot of the grammar rules might be like that. And, what are your thoughts on a statement that maybe we don't need to be as careful as we claim we should when we're editing?
Well, I think in the case of let's use the semicolon since it's such a hot topic tonight. You say you read it almost as a period, and it kind of functions as a period because you should be able to have two separate sentences. If you take that semicolon out and put a period, you should be able to have two full sentences there. And I think what it does is it just gives you a little bit of a pause without it being such an abruptness of a period breaking up.
Do you think the reader actually, do you think it has that effect on readers, since most people, and honestly, most people wouldn't know the proper way to use a semicolon, since readers don't really understand what it's supposed to do? Is there any purpose to it other than for grammarians?
It burns my eyes every time I see it. So,
I do think it has a purpose because for every person who doesn't know how to use it, there is someone out there who does know how to use it. And it would bother us. It would bother me personally. This is the only reason. If I were the only person it would help, it would still be worth it to know how to use a semicolon. Please work with me, people.
I feel like I'm at a stoplight and I just keep going. Red, green, red, green, red, yellow, green, red, yellow, green, red, yellow, green. I don't know.
I don't know what to do when I see one. It horrifies me when I see one in something I've written and you throw a semicolon and I'm like, oh my God, what? Change it. No, can't we use something else? It looks like it just doesn't know what it wants to be.
It figures I would work with the two authors who absolutely hate them. And I am supposed to be your symbiotic editor-writer relationship here. And you people hate the very thing I love. I don't even know why this works.
It's confused. It doesn't even know what it wants to do.
True.
Does it want to pause? Does it want to stop? Like, I don't think it has its own identity.
No, it's made up of a period and a comma. I mean, like, what do you do there? Yeah. I mean, I know what to do, but...
The worst part of it now is these days people are getting those, the tattoos of it, meaning, like they paused because they were almost very close to committing suicide and they decided to live on. I can't see it as anything more than the negative connotation to it that, these people wanted to kill themselves. So do you want to kill yourself?
I know, I don't. And it makes me mad that they stole our idea because we were going to get a semicolon tattoo to celebrate our friendship.
No. I was going to get a period.
And I was going to get the comma.
You were going to get a comma.
Together, yes.
Honestly, you know what it reminds me of, and I'll probably have to cut the sentence, but it reminds me of premature ejaculation. You kind of finished the sentence, but you didn't.
And why on earth would you need to cut
that? Exactly.
Yeah, it's not really a kid's show.
But that's what premature publishers are like. They jump right out of the gate and they are so not ready.
Just not finished, but not really.
They are semicolon writers. That's how I see them.
Semicolon writers which is sexy. Commas, because I love commas. But hey, speaking of different types of things, why do you think we have so many types of editing services? Copy, line, proof, developmental, and like most of them have a different editors for each. Why isn't it one step what makes it so difficult, or what's the complication, I guess, for editors?
Now, I guess I would ask you, and I'm going to ask you and Raymond both, before you started writing, when somebody said editor, what did you think of? I mean, based on the knowledge you have now of what types of editors there are, what did you used to think of when you heard the word editor?
I thought that they did grammar, punctuation, sentence. I thought they did everything, that including developmental editor. Like, because they always, you watch movies, TV shows, anything like that, they always say, oh, if there's an author in there, I'm going to send it to my editor, and they told me to change this and that. And then you also know that the editor makes the punctuation and grammars. So I remember assuming the one person did everything.
I would have said proofreader because I was overconfident in the correct use of grammar. So I figured, it's someone who just has to kind of go through my stuff and see if maybe I had a there mistake, or, maybe not a fragment sentence problem. In fiction, I believe you can write fragment sentences, and I think they're useful. But so I really was thinking proofreader. I never understood the difference between a line editor and a proofreader. I'm like, well, does that mean the proofreader's not going through every line?
Well, and it's funny because a lot of people differentiate between a line editor and a copy editor, where the line editor deals with the structure of the sentence and a copy editor deals with the typos and the punctuation of a sentence. Before I started copy editing, I really didn't know anything about substantive editing, content editing, where you help the overall plot of a story. And I would love to do that type of editing, but I don't always catch everything like that because I'm so focused on the tiny stuff. I look at all
one track mind.
Exactly. Yeah. I look at all the typos, and I look at all the grammar, and I look at the sentence structure. And I totally miss the fact that somebody has gotten up from the floor 3 times in the same conversation when someone's visiting them. Right. I did catch something like that once or twice in someone's book, but overall, I miss that type of stuff because that's not what I'm usually looking for. So I think I would have to have a complete shift of, take off that hat and put a different.
I would say that we also have a one-track mind in that sense. I know earlier we were talking about that, the passion and everything. I think that's what happens. It's just we want to create and we want to have the words out, and so we don't, and even as readers, we're so into the story, we just don't pay attention to that stupid semicolon,
right?
Or there. Even if you know that it was wrong, sometimes, as long as it's not too much. Yeah. You overlook it because, hey, I make the mistake all the time. Well, I don't make that.
No, you don't.
Not me. Just saying.
I think in addition to that, for me, it's just you need that second set of eyes. I mean, obviously, besides fiction, I wrote tons of business stuff, and it's just if you've written it, you always see what you think you're going to see, and it's difficult to read your work. You can read your work backwards to look for mistakes and stuff. But I think you're going to, earlier the question was, even in a traditionally published book, you're going to find grammatical errors. And this may sound lazy, but it's not. I'm just like, why am I going to waste my time trying to I'm still not going to find all the stuff I should. So just get a fresh set of eyes on that and just pay for that to be done. And I just think I'm better off that way.
I don't write novels. I only write blog posts that are 1,000 words or less, and I still have to send my stuff off to Kat to have her proof it for me. And she catches stuff every time. Usually it's just when I'm whining, or she'll catch something that's redundant, or she'll catch a missed letter.
Yeah, but not really a letter. I was just gonna say the same thing, and this is what applies to you too, Lynda. It's when we forget to add a specific word, like of or what, like, because we know that it's there, we see it, but it's not actually written down, and really, for like every 3 posts of yours, there's only one tiny thing missing. But
can you say that again, please, louder?
No. It's just, you can just, when the podcast comes out, you can just rewind and replay that part.
Don't cut it.
I will say one thing about you, and I know, Raymond, you'll agree. we've worked with other editors, and one of the good things that you have is that you can actually adjust to our individual styles, and you'll know exactly what I mean to say, the way I want to say it, and you won't change everything. And you can actually adapt to our voices. Did you have that experience with anybody else, Raymond?
No, absolutely not. And that's why second version of my first book that went through a very expensive organization that, has editors, really wasn't well done. They weren't good at their job, and they probably weren't good at communicating what I wanted to communicate. But I think there's another issue too involved in the editing process, and I don't do it, so I don't edit, so I don't know. It takes a writer 3 months, 6 months, a year to write a book, but most of us, when we hand it off to the editor, we are like, well, how long to get this back? And we have numbers in our head like a week, 2 weeks, and I don't think in a traditional publishing house, when the editors get that book, they're making any promises of 2 weeks, because I think it's the same unraveling. You go blind. I mean, by the time you get halfway through, a book, especially one of 200,000 words, you sort of become a little inoculated to seeing all of the mistakes in it, because you literally have to look at that one sentence at a time.
Absolutely accurate. I've had times where I'll go to work on a manuscript, and I can tell when I'm doing the second round of edits, I can tell exactly which chapters I was tired on the first time around, which is why I always do 2 rounds. I feel that's essential. I know some editors only do 1 round. I just feel like there's so much that can be missed. Even if the author doesn't have to change anything based on that round of edits, there's just a lot of stuff that you're looking at the big picture edits, whereas the second time around, you're looking at the micro edits.
I think that's why one of the things you do the copy editing and everything, but you always suggest for us to go through our changes, and then you would also do proofreading. Do many authors pass on that?
I try not to let them pass on it. I have my pricing is structured so that they get 2 rounds of edits. And I think that's essential. If they do the 2 rounds of the line edit and the copy edit with me, I have another person do a proofread at the same time that I do a proofread. So there's 2 separate sets of eyes on it. One who is familiar with it, me, and one who has never seen it at all and who would likely catch the typos.
My process is Cheryl's always the first listener, right? But she gets like really the raw, hey, I just wrote this chapter, listen to it. I don't think she's ever, I don't think she's heard any of my stories in their final form. And thinking about it, I'm like, I really should wait until the final end when everything is done and then read that book aloud. When you read something out loud like that, you're going to find those little things that may have been, I'm not commas, but you're going to find those little things that maybe didn't make sense.
Yeah, I agree there. Sometimes when you read something aloud, you realize you're stumbling over a sentence and you have to stop, reread it, kind of make your eyes go, not back in your head, but backward on the page and figure out where to put the emphasis. And that to me says that you need to just restructure the sentence if you can't read it.
I will tell you personally, that does not work for everybody because I have an accent and I will read it through my accent and it makes total sense to me. So.
Right. You're like, that still sounds good. What are you talking about?
That's true. And what makes sense to you, then that's why a separate person has to maybe read it aloud too. Because then you realize, they don't even know how this sentence should be read. Kind of like when you write something really funny and then someone else does the delivery and they screw it up and you think, it's supposed to sound like this. And it just doesn't. And you don't know why they don't know what you're thinking.
If there was a national effort at reduction in grammar, what grammar rule or rules would you vote, besides whom, to just retract?
There's a lot of use of the word they for singular pronoun. It drives me crazy.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that drives me crazy, but a lot of editors are saying just use it, for goodness sakes.
Yeah. No, I agree. I don't think we should be doing he or she. I don't think we should be. And it's a no-win situation if a male author starts using he. We're like thinking,
Sexism.
Yeah, sexism and I got to split this up. I'm actually in favor of the singular they.
It drives me crazy, but I think as a society, as of writers and readers, that we are leaning toward it. That's one of those rules that I would be willing to bend on, even though it might make me a little bit crazy here and there. I think it's very practical.
I was hoping you'd be voting for semicolon.
I would get rid of the semicolons if people wrote sentences that didn't sound too choppy. I mean, a choppy sentence has its place, but not all of them. Some people don't know how.
That's true. But you're saying about the whole day thing, like, I feel like if you are mimicking speech, regular natural speech that everybody talks, it should be okay. And I know that should be okay mostly in dialogue, because that's when you're actually mimicking what people say. But, normally, but that becomes common. That becomes the norm in our head. So, yeah, I also vote. Raymond, I'm with you. Let's do this day.
And I want it to be a rule that everybody understands when I use those 3 periods. What do you call that? The ellipsis or whatever?
Ellipsis.
That stands for a drum roll.
As it should.
Like, what I'm saying is wait for it. So just understand when you see ... that means wait for it.
That is
and here it is.
That's what the 3 dots stand for. Wait for it. I'll never read them the same.
So, Lynda, a common social media inquiry is this: how do I find a good editor, and how would you suggest an author vet a potential editor?
Well, you call me, and that's really all you need. I can't imagine these people don't know my name by now. It is hard to find a good editor. I just recently discovered a few different editor groups, and I'm really enjoying it. Although, editors, they love to talk. I'm getting notifications night and day. I can barely keep up. I know.
Do they really?
I must be the exception because I never talk. But these people they're so knowledgeable on so many levels, and it's really part of it has made me realize how many different types of editing, fiction and nonfiction and medical and journals and indexing and all this different stuff. But one of the things I like is that some of them, there's a Facebook group, for example, called Ask a Book Editor. And you can get in the group as an author or an editor, and you just ask questions like, this may sound dumb, but, and then you can find different editors to fit your needs there.
Oh, I'll have to check that out.
Hey, no. It's not called Ask a Book Editor. It's called something else. I'm not sure what it is, but it's not that.
Hey, why haven't you added us to this group? We like this stuff.
Ask. It's fun. You guys would actually enjoy yourselves.
Well, we didn't know. You didn't tell us. You keep notice. Sure.
She's like, yeah. Shut up, you guys aren't. You guys don't need to go there.
You don't need it. Other people need it. It's called I can't remember the name of it now, but I'm sure I'll recall it.
She's like, I can't remember. I think it's Easy Reading Editing.
Oh, you don't even know the name of my blog. Oh goodness, Raymond.
I've got your personal email.
True.
I need to go to your blog to get my book edited.
Please go to easyreaderediting.com.
But anybody can say they're an editor, and you, Raymond, you went through an editing house who.
And I went through someone else who was a complete sham.
And Kat went through somebody else also, who actually introduced errors into her book. And thankfully, you knew they were errors, which was pretty cool. That you're like, wait a minute, she's wrecking my book.
Yeah, she totally she changed so many things. I'm like, I know these things are wrong. So what I ended up doing, I asked her, hey, okay, so. Can I pick your brain about the story? So I switched it. Hey, I paid you, but I'm going to use you for the storyline. I never sent it back to her after that. And I only used her because she was recommended by someone else. And I took this person's advice because I hadn't checked her book out yet.
And that is one of those things where I remember that person, and I went to her website and looked, and the whole website was just full of errors. And I remember thinking, if you're telling people that you are an editor, Your website has to be as close to perfect as possible. If you have to look over your pages every day to try and find one more error just in case, you have to look at your pages every day. It just does nobody any good to say, I'm an editor, and then have a website that just screams that you're not an editor.
Yes.
I was putting a short story into an anthology, and the person who was publishing the anthology that never got published also claimed to be an editor.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, well, it's a short story. How, you do editing, just how much would it be to edit the short story? And she said like $20 or whatever. I'm like, yeah, okay, go ahead and do it. And literally changed a sentence, edited a sentence. It no longer had the impact or even made sense to what was being communicated.
She changed the whole meaning of the sentence.
And I know you're writing, you put so much effort into just the right words. I mean, agonizing over them.
And she made it a completely different implication. I'm like, okay, so, all right, live and learn, $20. I just threw that away and then I sent it to you. And
see, there you go. And I charge you $30, same as downtown.
Right, exactly. Got changed back on a 10. So honestly, though, present company excluded. The grammar police, because we can't say Nazis anymore. The grammar police they're sort of annoying and maybe even a little bit arrogant. And you might have heard the episode we did. I call it a little trolly. And these are your people. Do they just derive pleasure out of correcting others, or is it just some obsession that they need medicine for?
I would like to give them some medicine. I'll tell you. I think it's hilarious that friends of mine online will post something on my wall, or they'll comment in a thread that I'm in, and then they'll say, oh, you're probably analyzing my sentences. And I think, no, I'm not. It's Facebook. It's not something you're selling to anybody. I really don't pay attention to that. But, some things will drive me crazy, but I don't feel the need to call out strangers on their spelling and grammar and punctuation on social media. Now, if they're putting it in a book that I've paid good money for, I will call them out with bells on. But I don't know why people seem to get some pleasure in that. I think it's a sense of needing to feel important. I think we all want people to think we're smart. And we all know, of course, Raymond is the smartest one of the three of us, or he tells us that all the time anyway. It's probably actually Kat.
We tell him that.
That's right.
Fake it till you make it, baby.
People fall in love with your brain. But nobody actually thinks that I have one. SK and I share one, and we're happy.
Oh, please, no, nobody thinks that. Nobody thinks I know anything. But that's okay,
because then we surprise them. Every once in a while, we just shock them, and they don't know what to do with us when we come up with something logical.
I don't think I shock anyone. They just look at my boobs, and that's what they say.
You got me there.
Hey, Lynda, completely, going off a little bit, but I think this is an important question. Why do you think authors are always so shocked by the cost of editing books?
I think part of it is that they've never thought about it and have never researched it prior to writing. Kind of like the people who write and say, I've always wanted to write a book, and they think it'll be easy, and then they're surprised at how hard it is. But I think that the price of edits, I think they think it's not a big deal to edit a book. And so they undervalue the actual work and the skill it takes.
So that's all been interesting. You know what? I'll tell you this, one of the most interesting things is actually this podcast probably would never have existed without Lynda, because Raymond and I met through her. She was a matchmaker.
That's great.
So, obviously, Lynda, thank you for joining us. Very excellent conversation. We usually leave everybody with a quote. If you don't have one off the top of your head,
just
we'll make
up
one
and say that No, don't say that I said it.
So, Lynda, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
You can find Lynda at easyreaderediting.com. And now we'll leave you with this quote about editors by Arthur Plotnick.
You write to communicate to the hearts and minds of others what's burning inside you, and we edit to let the fire show through the smoke.
Thank you for listening to the Writers Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. For more articles, news and advice, visit our website, writersafterdark.net, or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. The Writers Podcast is a Writers After Dark radio production. Executive producers SK Anthony and Raymond Esposito. Copyright 2017.